In the heart of southeastern Nigeria, beneath the hustle of Onitsha's booming markets and the hum of commerce along the river Niger, a shadow once loomed. His name was whispered in fear. His presence, unseen yet deeply felt. He wasn't a legend. He was a nightmare, and his name was Derico Nwamama. But before he became a symbol of terror, Derico was just another child of the street, a boy shaped by hardship, survival, and eventually violence. Born Aquadilian Du, Derico hailed from the Aguleri region of Anambra State. He grew up in the tight, rugged alleys where opportunity was rare and survival demanded more than innocence. He wasn't born evil, he was forged by the streets. Derico started small, lifting wallets, slipping phones from unsuspecting pockets, and disappearing into crowds before anyone could blink. But he had a hunger that pickpocketing couldn't satisfy. He wanted power, not just money, and he wanted it fast. So he escalated. By the time he was in his late teens, Derico was no longer just a street thief. He was a warlord in the making. The 1990s were volatile in Onitsha. Known as a thriving commercial hub, the city also suffered from rising crime, political instability, and a failing police system. Trust in the authorities was eroding fast. Armed robbers operated with impunity, and citizens were left vulnerable. Amid this chaos, Derico rose to infamy. He organized a gang of bloodthirsty men and launched a reign of terror that would paralyze the city. Banks, buses, marketplaces, homes, nowhere was safe. His trademark: he left little to no survivors. Witnesses weren't allowed to breathe. One of his most horrific attacks involved a 59-seater bus heading to Lagos. Derico and his gang hijacked it, robbed every soul on board, and allegedly murdered nearly everyone. Only 4 people survived. By the time he turned 22, Derico had reportedly killed over 100 civilians and 25 police officers. Not even law enforcement dared confront him. He was untouchable. Citizens of Anambra were done. The fear, the bloodshed, the helplessness, it had pushed them to the edge. Governor Chinwoke Badenoyu, under immense pressure from both his people and the then-President Olusegun Obasanjo, knew something drastic had to be done. The police had tried and failed. Operation Derico, a full-blown manhunt, produced no results. So the governor turned to something, or rather someone, that operated outside the confines of the law. Originating from Aba in Abia State, the Bakassi Boys were not your typical vigilantes. They were a feared, self-styled militia group known for their brutal justice, supernatural charms, and no-nonsense approach to crime. Born out of frustration with unchecked criminality, they quickly became legends for their fearless takedowns of dangerous criminals. Armed with machetes, rifles, and rumored spiritual protections, the Bakassi Boys became judge, jury, and executioner. When they were unleashed in Anambra, the city knew something had changed. Derico's days were numbered. Derico wasn't stupid. He knew the Bakassi Boys were after him. He began changing hideouts frequently, moving between Onitsha and Abuja, keeping a low profile while his gang continued operations. But his past had caught up with him. It was July 3, 2001, when fate or justice caught up with Derico. On a hot afternoon, a bus traveling into Onitsha was flagged down by a group of men. Derico, sensing danger, panicked and jumped out of the window, but it was too late. The Bakassi Boys had him, from predator to prey. His capture sent shockwaves across the state. Markets erupted in celebration. For once, the people felt justice was not only possible, it was visible. 6 days later, on July 9th, he was paraded before the people, bruised, blooded, broken. The same man who once stood untouchable now stood stripped of power, pleading for mercy. "I am not evil," he cried, trembling under the weight of his fate. It was when I killed Chigina that people began to think I was strong. But it was too late. His sins could not be undone. His voice, once feared, now begged for a second chance he would never get. Amid chants and war songs, Derico was brought to the open square. A microphone was placed before him, not for defense, but for confession. Then came the cutlass. With a single swing, Derico's head was severed from his body. The crowd screamed, some in horror, most in joy. The body convulsed before collapsing. His remains were later set on fire. No grave, no ceremony, nothing to remember him by but ashes and a blooded street. The questions that remain. But even as the crowd celebrated, questions lingered. Was this justice or vengeance? Did the state endorse murder in the name of law? What becomes of a society when vigilantes become heroes? The Bokasi boys had done what the police couldn't, but their brutal methods soon drew scrutiny. They too began acting without accountability, and eventually, they were declared wanted by the same system that once empowered them. The irony was bitter. The hunter had become the hunted again. Derico's short, violent life remains one of the most disturbing cautionary tales in Nigerian history. He was a product of a broken system, one where poverty met lawlessness and produced monsters. At just 22 years old, he had left behind a trail of destruction, only to be destroyed himself in the most public and grotesque manner possible. His death wasn't just the fall of a criminal, it was a moment of national introspection.